The massive intergalactic war council chamber hummed with activity, the air thick with tension and the faint glow of holographic star maps flickering above the circular meeting table. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their designated seats, their eyes focused on the looming crisis at hand, the unstoppable advance of the Zarkil swarm, a ruthless force that had already consumed entire planetary systems in its wake. At the head of the council, Supreme Strategist Hartak, a towering reptilian warlord with scales like polished obsidian, slammed his clawed fist against the table, demanding order. We cannot afford delay. The Zarkil move ever closer to the core worlds. Show us what your fleets can do, so we may form our battle strategy. The holographic display shifted, bringing up the various allied fleets, each showcasing their might. The Akar Dominion displayed their sleek, arrowhead-shaped warships, equipped with plasma lances capable of slicing through enemy hulls like paper. The Kalari, masters of energy manipulation, revealed their shimmering, spherical vessels, capable of generating gravity wells to disrupt enemy formations. The Gornathi, known for their brutal direct assaults, boasted massive dreadnoughts bristling with rail cannons and kinetic artillery. The council murmured in approval. Then, the humans arrived. As their fleet data appeared on the holographic display, silence fell over the chamber. Instead of the imposing angular warships expected of a race that had survived countless interstellar conflicts, the humans had brought freighters. The ships looked clunky, industrial, utterly unimpressive. Their hulls were dull and scarred, lacking the sleek aggression of the other fleets. Some of them even had visible cargo containers still attached. A few council members exchanged confused glances, and then, slowly, laughter began to ripple through the room. The Kalari ambassador, a being of pure energy contained within a shifting crystalline exosuit, pulsed with amusement. "Is this some kind of misunderstanding, Admiral Carter?" he asked, his voice resonating like a wind chime. "Have you mistaken a civilian convoy for a war fleet?" More laughter followed, with some delegates outright shaking their heads in disbelief. Admiral Evelyn Carter, standing tall in her crisp navy blue uniform, remained completely unfazed. Her piercing gaze swept across the gathered leaders, her expression unreadable. "No mistake," she said simply. "This is Earth's fleet." More murmurs. A few alien commanders smirked, exchanging smug looks, clearly amused at the idea that humanity had come unprepared. Hartak, still towering over the table, bared his jagged teeth in a slow, mocking grin. "Humans," he rumbled, his deep voice carrying through the chamber. "If you have no intention of truly fighting, you need not embarrass yourselves here. The Zarkil will show no mercy to outdated cargo haulers." Carter's lips twitched ever so slightly at the corner, as if suppressing a knowing smile. "We understand the stakes better than you think, strategist," she said evenly. "I assure you, our ships will serve their purpose." More snorts of disbelief. A Gornathi general, his hulking, armored form leaning forward aggressively, scoffed. "You bring freighters to war. The Zarkil will cut through you before you can even launch a counterattack." Carter met his gaze unflinchingly. "That remains to be seen." The tension in the chamber grew thick, the initial amusement now giving way to something else, an undercurrent of curiosity, a slight uncertainty. The humans weren't panicking. In fact, Carter's calm demeanor only deepened the unease creeping into the council. Hartak narrowed his piercing golden eyes. "Very well, Admiral. You may keep your freighters," he said, the word dripping with disdain. "But do not expect us to divert our forces to protect you when the battle begins." Carter merely inclined her head, unfazed. "Understood." With that, the council moved on, discussing battle formations, fallback strategies, and contingency plans. Yet, despite all the analysis, more than a few commanders found their gazes lingering on the display of Earth's so-called fleet, their minds gnawed by an unsettling question. If the humans truly had nothing to offer, why were they so confident? The battlefield stretched across the void, a vast, merciless expanse where the fate of entire civilizations would be decided. The Zarkil swarm had arrived in full force, their biomechanical warships a horrific fusion of organic sinew and living metal, pulsating with eerie crimson light. They moved like a singular entity, their formations shifting fluidly, an unstoppable tide of destruction. Across from them, the Allied fleet stood ready, sleek Akar warships, shimmering Kalari gravity wielders, the brutish Gornathi dreadnoughts, all arranged in meticulously planned formations. And then, sitting just behind them, almost laughably out of place, was the human fleet. Freighters. Cargo haulers. Industrial vessels that had no business on a battlefield. From the war bridge of his flagship, Supreme Strategist Hardhack observed the fleets aligning, his reptilian features twisted in irritation. "This is absurd," he muttered, watching the human vessels take their positions. "They will be slaughtered within minutes." A holographic projection of Admiral Evelyn Carter appeared beside him, standing in her command deck, her face composed as ever. "Admiral Carter," Hardhack growled, "if you have any sense left, pull your ships back now. This is no place for your merchant fleet." Carter's voice was calm, measured. "With all due respect, strategist, we've planned for this." She turned slightly, giving a subtle hand signal to someone off-screen. On cue, the human fleet began to shift, slowly at first, their freighters adjusting formation, moving in ways that were oddly deliberate. The other fleets focused on their own battle preparations, assuming the humans were positioning themselves for a desperate last stand. The countdown to engagement began. The Zarkil attacked first. As expected, they surged forward in a chaotic, overwhelming swarm, their ships accelerating at impossible speeds, hurling energy projectiles and acidic biomissiles in massive volleys. The Allied fleets responded with carefully coordinated defenses, firing plasma lances, kinetic barges, and gravity fields to disrupt their advance. The battle erupted into a frenzy of destruction. And then, the human ships moved. One by one, their freighters suddenly accelerated at breakneck speeds, shifting in seemingly erratic patterns. What had once appeared to be slow, lumbering haulers now zipped through the battlefield with eerie precision. The Kalari Admiral's energy core flickered in confusion. "Impossible. Those are cargo haulers. How are they moving like that?" Hardhack's golden eyes narrowed. "They're not just moving. They're dodging." Sure enough, as the Zarkil launched a second volley, what should have been easy, defenseless targets twisted and turned, their massive hulls pivoting at angles no freighter should have been capable of. The Zarkil, which relied on overwhelming force and predictable prey, suddenly found their attacks missing. And then, the humans retaliated. Hidden compartments opened across the freighters, revealing heavy weapon systems, railguns, missile pods, and experimental energy cannons, previously disguised as cargo containers. The ships unleashed devastating counterfire, catching the enemy completely off guard. The battlefield lit up with explosions as the first wave of Zarkil attackers were shredded by unexpected firepower. Akar tacticians scrambled to analyze what they were seeing, while Gornathi warriors erupted in raucous laughter, exhilarated by the deception. "Those aren't freighters," a Kalari strategist finally murmured, realization dawning. "They never were," Carter confirmed, her voice unwavering. "Earth doesn't build warships to look like warships." As the battle raged on, the human fleet continued to defy expectations. Their ships weaved through the chaos, their seemingly unwieldy designs perfectly engineered for deceptive maneuverability. Their armor, appearing outdated at first glance, absorbed energy blasts with advanced deflection plating. The Zarkil, thrown into confusion, attempted to adjust, only to be torn apart by the very vessels they had dismissed as non-threats. Hardhack stared at the unfolding chaos, a slow grin spreading across his sharp-toothed face. "Clever, humans, very clever." The battlefield was a storm of chaos and destruction, but the tide had turned in a way no one had anticipated. The Zarkil swarm, a force feared across the galaxy for its unrelenting brutality, was faltering. Their sleek, biomechanical warships, once thought to be the pinnacle of offensive warfare, were now erratic, struggling to adapt to the impossible maneuverability and hidden firepower of Earth's so-called freighters. Explosions rippled across the void as human railguns and missile barrages found their marks, tearing through Zarkil hulls that had never before encountered this level of precise devastation. The Allied fleets, initially skeptical, were now in awe, fighting alongside a force they had underestimated from the beginning. On the bridge of the Zarkil flagship, High Broodlord Xith seethed, his chitinous mandibles clicking in agitation. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. The humans were meant to be an afterthought, a footnote in the grand conquest of the galaxy. And yet, their ships, those pathetic cargo-hauling things, were dismantling his armada with ruthless efficiency. His clawed fingers tightened around the armrest of his command throne as another cluster of his fighters was obliterated in a well-coordinated strike from what should have been a transport fleet. They were never freighters, one of his tacticians finally choked out, staring at the carnage in disbelief. They disguised warships as civilian vessels. A guttural snarl ripped through Xitha's throat, his rage barely contained. How does a race so primitive in warfare devise such deception? He turned his piercing red eyes toward the tactical display, watching as the humans continued their slaughter. Their ships were not only effective in combat but also playing the enemy, baiting Zarkil vessels into overextending, then striking with overwhelming force before slipping away like ghosts. Every instinct the swarm had relied on for centuries, overpower, outnumber, annihilate, was being used against them. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the UHS Resolute, Admiral Evelyn Carter stood unshaken, watching her fleet execute the battle plan to perfection. Every maneuver, every feint, every strike had been anticipated and accounted for. The Zarkil had never fought an enemy like this before, one that understood psychological warfare as deeply as it did physical combat. The real war had started long before the first shot was fired. In the moment the Zarkil assumed Earth was weak. A transmission came through from strategist Hartak of the Akar Dominion, his reptilian visage flickering on the main display. His tone was somewhere between admiration and frustration. "You lied to us, Admiral Carter. You let the entire galaxy believe your fleets were incapable of real combat." Carter allowed herself a small smile. "We never lied, strategist. We simply never corrected the assumption." Hartak exhaled sharply through his nostrils, shaking his head. "Deception like this, it is unheard of in open warfare. It is dishonorable." Carter's expression didn't waver. "And yet, it's winning." Another transmission came through, this time from a Kalari admiral, whose glowing neural patterns flickered in what could only be interpreted as sheer awe. "You humans are dangerous." Carter nodded. "Yes, we are." The battle was shifting now. The Zarkil fleet, despite its overwhelming numbers, was breaking formation, its commanders scrambling for new strategies in the face of Earth's unconventional warfare. But there was no counter-strategy. Every attempt to reorganize was met with disruption, every attempt to escape met with pursuit. Their forces, built on the belief of absolute superiority, were fracturing under the weight of their own arrogance. And then, the final blow. Carter turned to her tactical officer, nodding once. "Execute Protocol Obsidian." Across the battlefield, human ships that had remained dormant until now suddenly powered up. These were not freighters, nor were they warships. They were decoys, massive, seemingly abandoned husks, floating unnoticed among the wreckage. And now, they came to life. Hidden thrusters ignited, and the once dead ships surged forward, ramming directly into the heart of the remaining Zarkil forces. With no weapons fired, no battle cries, just the cold, calculated movement of war machines disguised as scrap, the final trap was sprung. The Zarkil panicked. Their formations collapsed entirely, ships colliding in desperate attempts to evade. But it was already too late. The disguised warships erupted in massive controlled detonations, engulfing the swarm's command vessels in an explosion that outshone the nearest star. On the bridge of the flagship, Xitha's final thought was not of rage, nor fear, but something far worse. The battlefield was silent now, an eerie stillness settling over the wreckage of the once mighty Zarkil fleet. Fires burned in the cold vacuum of space, flickering remnants of ships that had once been deemed invincible. Drifting debris floated like silent testaments to the battle that had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of warfare. The human fleet, seemingly battered but strategically untouched, held its formation. The once dominant Zarkil armada was now nothing more than smoldering ruins, their centuries-old doctrine shattered in a single engagement. Aboard the UHS Resolute, Admiral Evelyn Carter stood at the bridge's panoramic viewport, hands clasped behind her back as she surveyed the wreckage. The weight of victory pressed upon her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a cold certainty. There was no elation in her stance, no celebratory outburst from the crew. This was not just a battle won. It was a message delivered. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The holo display flickered to life, and the reptilian face of strategist Hartak of the Akar Dominion reappeared. His golden eyes, once skeptical of humanity's military might, now held a glimmer of something bordering on respect and fear. "Admiral Carter," he said, voice edged with both admiration and wariness, "this was not a battle. This was a lesson." Carter inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the statement without arrogance. A necessary one. Hardhack exhaled, his species equivalent of a reluctant sigh. The Zarkil believed you weak. That your ships were nothing more than glorified haulers. That Earth was a footnote in the galaxy's wars. I confess, many of us thought the same. The silence stretched between them, the weight of unspoken truths settling in. Carter let the moment hang before speaking. That was your mistake. The strategist studied her for a long moment before nodding. And now the galaxy will not make it again. His gaze flickered to the drifting remains of the Zarkil fleet. Nor will the swarm, if they survive this humiliation. A second transmission cut through the conversation, and a new face appeared, High Chancellor Viral of the Kalari Alliance. Her translucent, bioluminescent form pulsed softly, a sign of deep contemplation. Admiral, she said, her tone measured, I suspect this battle will change more than just the perception of Earth. This deception, this strategy, it is unlike anything the galaxy has seen before. Carter turned fully to the hologram, her expression unreadable. Deception is a tool. One we use to ensure survival. Viral tilted her head, her bioluminescence flaring in intrigue. And yet, I wonder, if humanity can turn freighters into warships, mislead an entire galaxy, and dismantle an empire in a single engagement, what else have you hidden? Carter's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, though it did not reach her eyes. Chancellor, you're assuming this is all we had to show. The weight of that statement settled heavily between them. The Kalari leader regarded her for a moment longer, then simply nodded and ended the transmission. Hardhack, still present, let out a low growl. You do not just fight wars, Admiral Carter. You shape them. Carter gave a small nod. We do what we must. As the transmission cut out, Carter turned back to the viewport. The galaxy had learned a truth today, one that could never be undone. Earth was no backwater world, no helpless civilization clinging to the edges of relevance. Humanity had not just survived the galactic stage, it had mastered it, bending the very rules of warfare to its advantage. A quiet beep sounded behind her, and her tactical officer spoke. Ma'am, orders. Carter took a slow breath, eyes still on the wreckage. Begin recovery operations. Salvage what we can, rescue any survivors. And send a message to the remaining Zarkil commanders. The officer hesitated. Message content, ma'am? Carter's gaze was steady as she answered. Let them know that Earth remembers. Across the battlefield, the remnants of the galaxy's once unquestioned conquerors drifted through the void, their reign ended by an enemy they had never understood. And far beyond the wreckage, on worlds that had once dismissed humanity as nothing more than traders and diplomats, leaders and warlords watched in silence, contemplating a truth that could no longer be ignored. The day had begun with the galaxy laughing at Earth's warships. It ended with them wondering what else they had never seen coming.